Welcome back everyone. We're looking at classes today. We've done a class tutorial before, but that was sort of a basic entry level into what a class is and how to call certain elements from a class. What I'm going to show you today is how to set a class up in a more formal way, which would be expected of you in an A-level setting. So this is about how to create something which is object oriented, and we're going to talk about that in more detail in just a second. So just to start off, I'm just going to save my Python file. Now, with a class, as we looked at before, we need to define it first of all. So in Python we can define a class by just saying class and then giving it a name. So we're going to start off today, we're going to revisit the text adventure, and we're actually going to create some of the hero attributes ourselves. So we looked at the text adventure, and when we were doing the class, the user would pick either one of three, and then they would be set certain class variables from there. We're going to actually allow the user to pick certain items for their character in kind of more of a, you ever played like a Fallout game where you're asked to sort of pick certain skills at the beginning? That's what we're going to do. So, but first things first, how do we actually set out a class? So a class is set out like this. We need to define it and we need to initialize it. Now in Python, if we do double underscores around the initializing, we can make the class private, and that means that certain attributes can't be taken from it and things like that. But this is sort of a cheating way to do it in Python, because Python doesn't actually have something for that built into it. So we are going to use define and then initialize it, and we need to actually put in here the attributes that we're going to initialize. I'm going to put these underlines back in quickly, just to make this private. So Python always has to have self as the first thing in its class. Other programs don't have to have this as self, but Python requires you to do it. So if you try to define a class and you don't have self in, you're going to get thrown through a sort of feedback loop, and you'll get a weird error, and it won't actually specifically tell you that you're missing the word self. So we need to put self in, and then we need to put the attributes in that we want our hero to have. So I want hero health, I want hero attack, I want hero luck, hero ranged, hero defense, hero magic, and a hero name. So we have told Python what we want, and go on there. So we told Python what is going to actually be in this class, and now we're going to do what we call setters and getters. Well, first of all, we need to construct the class. So we've said what it is, but what happens is a class is just a blueprint for a way for us to handle certain variables as they're passed through to it. So what this class is actually saying is when these things are passed through to it, we can set something up. So first of all, we need to actually set up the constructor class. Let's make sure I actually spell attack correctly. So the first thing I need to do is that I need to make sure that whenever my whenever we define one of these, they're passed into this health variable, and that will effectively kind of just set it for me. And I do this all the way down. So I do self dot attack, and then that equals my hero attack. These two cannot be the same name, so make sure these are different. So that's why I've got hero attack and then attack. And I do that all the way down. So that's me constructing the blueprint for this class. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do what we call getters and setters. So in any class, if you are doing an object-oriented piece of programming, it is expected that you would lay out your class constructor like this with getters and setters. I'll explain to you what those both are. So getters are definitions. So if I do define get health, return self.health. So what this actually does is it creates a function in Python that my user can actually type in to return the health variable. Okay, that's the health attribute, should I say. So all classes, as you make them, have getters and setters. So if you were creating any other class, you would have your getters set out like this. And it's exactly the same the whole way through. So that's how I would get the health. This is how I would get the attack, so get attack, and I'd put self in the brackets, and then this would return self.attack. And it just means that I can return these variables into the program, and I can use them if I was to call these getters. Now, setters are slightly different. So a setter is what we can use to actually change an attribute within this. Say, for example, later on in the game, we wanted to change one of these attacks or something like that. We could actually use a setter to set out a new attack value. Because this is a private class, we don't want our user just to be able to kind of make changes sort of as and when. We want changes to happen in the specific way that we've programmed them to happen. So in order to do that, we program them in this way. So we do def and we do set health and we do self new health and the self dot health equals the new health. So whatever is passed into this parameter here as the new health then goes into my self.health. So it gets passed to here, which then gets passed back to here. So now I have a new health variable. Okay, and I do exactly the same with all of my attributes here to actually allow me to set any attribute, but specifically in the way that I want to. So I do def set attack, and then again self and new attack, and then self dot attack equals new attack. So this is future proofing my class for when I want to actually change some attributes. I can do that later on by calling certain things. So I am now going to do that. You don't want to do it for all of them. I'm going to quickly do it for all of them, and then you will see how it looks when it's all done. So this is where we've come to now. So we've finished off just entering in the rest of that data. So I've put all the constructed pieces here. So this is everything which is in the brackets. So every time I set one of these, they are set to the class I've made. If I need to get any of the items here, I can use the get functions to actually return them. And if I need to set anything new, so if anything changes in the game, I can set them here. I can also use methods with this, but we'll look at methods in more detail another time. So a method is something like a specific calculation which is to do with this class. So if they had a special attack, how we would actually calculate that kind of thing. We'll look at that in more detail. A couple of other things I've put in here that we're going to need for the next bit is the module random, module time, and this here from pprint import pprint. So pprint is pretty printing, and it's used for actually displaying class information in an easy way, really. You'll see it in sort of how it works in a minute. So what we're going to do is we're going to sort of ask the user a series of questions, and the answers to those questions are going to build our class. I said something sort of similar to like a Fallout game or something like that, and you know, you need to have a think about how you could do this in a bit more of an interesting way than the way I'm going to show you. I'll show you the basics and you build on it from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define create class, and in here I'm going to get the user to input, and I'm just going to get them to say so basically, if they choose, if they think they're more strategic, they're going to press 1. Actually, they're going to press 1. And if they're more of a warrior, they're going to press 2. And depending on their inputs, will depend on what values we assign to their class. So we're going to do a quick while loop here, which makes sure they've actually put in the right thing. So while a is not equal to 1 and a is not equal to 2, print invalid selection, and we just give them the opportunity to make the selection again. So if they've made the correct selection, we're going to move forward. So if they make the correct selection, so if a is equal to 1, we're going to set the hero's attack value, I'm going to set it to 50, and I'm going to set the hero's defense to 100. So elif a is equal to 2, we're going to set their attack value to 100, and we're going to set their defense to 50. So that's two out of the amount. How many I've got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 2 out of 7, which we've got set. So for everything else, nothing else is going to get typed because I've got the while loop there. So I'm just going to say else. Actually, I don't need an else there. We'll just leave it. You don't always have to have an else. So the next thing we want to do is we want the user to have a luck. So this is what we're going to have random for. So b equals input, and I'm going to get the user. So let's say press enter to roll a dice. So this dice will, 10-sided dice is going to determine the user's luck. I'm going to use the time.sleep just to build a little bit of suspense. If you are using time.sleep, make sure you use it for little amounts of time, so 0.2 of a second and things like that. I'm going to print rolling dice. And I'm going to make my hero's luck equal to a random integer, so random.randint, and that random integer is going to be between 0 and 10. So this is a randomly generated roll for them, and then I'm going to let the user know what their luck is. So print your hero has, and then the hero luck variable, luck out of 10. So they'll be able to see how lucky or how unlucky they're going to be when certain things happen in the game. Last input here, we're going to do it as c equals input, and just basic. So are you more a bow and arrow or magic user? So are you more of a bow and arrow user or a magic user? And then we're going to do the same kind of while loop. So while c is not equal to 1 and c is not equal to 2, print invalid selection, and then give them the opportunity to answer again. And obviously I need to make sure they are aware of what they need to put in. And you can make this a lot more user-friendly. There's a lot more different things you could do to this to make it a little bit easier for your users to understand. But we're just trying to get it to work, and so I can demonstrate how these classes work. So again now, so we do if c is equal to 1, we are going to set the range, so the hero range is going to equal 100, and the hero magic is going to equal 50. And if C is equal to 2, we're going to just swap those around. So ranged is equal to 50, and the magic is equal to 100. And again, we don't need the else statements. And then the last one here, we're going to do hero name equals input. What is your name, hero? And then we're going to print out just a little welcome for them. So welcome, hero name. Okay, standard. Had to print out a variable there. Now, what we're going to do now is each one of these, because these variables have all been created in this class, we need to return them. So we're going to use the return function, and we are going to return every one of these variables basically. So we need to return hero attack, hero luck, hero range, all of these, every single one of these variables which we've put in here. So starting from the top here, hero attack, and it actually might be useful to, we need to make sure we return them in the order which they are here. So annoyingly I've put them in a different thing. Health we're going to set automatically, so I need to return attack then luck. So hero attack, hero luck, hero ranged, hero defense, hero magic, and hero name. So they are returned in the order which they are set in the class, and that's because the next thing we're going to do is going to make this that be a little bit easier to actually set the character. So we've created our questionnaire which will set our character up for us, and depending on the user's answers now we need to actually plug this in to create the object. So this class here we created, this constructor, is going to be used to create an object. Let me show you what that looks like now. So the first thing we need to do is we need to we've returned this, but we need to get it out of there so we can actually use it. One way which you could do it is you could set everything as a global variable, but it isn't a good way to actually do this. We did this previously to kind of like get round like an easy, it's like a cheap way to return these variables, but we shouldn't really do that. We need to return them in a way which is going to be a bit more useful and a bit more like you would do if you were kind of going into A-level or into industry. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a list and sort of a variable, and what it's going to do is it's going to take basically this here is going to run this here, class create, oh sorry I've put it the wrong way around. I've called it create class. Okay, so this variable here is going to run this, and then when it gets to the end of this, it is going to, these attributes here are going to be returned in a list into class data. So we'll be able to actually use class data as a list. So class data 0 will be the hero attack, 1 will be the luck, 2 will be the ranged, and so on. So the last thing that needs to happen is we've done all of the work with creating the constructor class. We've done the questionnaire, which is going to take all of the attributes. We now just need to plug those into, and we've returned those into a list here. We now have to plug these list items into the piece of code which is going to actually create the objects. We've not actually created the character yet. So the character can be created by calling the class, which is hero, up here. We're going to call that, and we are going to, once we call the class, we need to put these attributes in. So health, attack, luck, range, defense, magic, and name. We have already created those and we've returned them here, and they're all in the right order. So what we're going to do is we're going to do set the health to 100, and then each item here, so hero attack, that is class data position 0. Hero luck is class data position 1. Hero range, and we do it all the way along. So I'm just going to position 2, position 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, we just need 4 and 5. And that is it. So let's see it working. So we also need to just return it. So let's print out the character, the actual class that we've created. So to do that, we use the pretty printing. So p print, not print, and you want the variables of character. So let's see it working. Okay, so one thing just to say before we look at it, you notice that I never called this actual thing. I never called this. This variable calls it for me, and when that variable calls it, once I go through it, all of these get returned into that variable, and then that creates a list, and then those listed items go into here. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you'll notice that this here, let's explain this again, this bit here is the same as this. So all I'm doing is plugging in the variables into these here, and those variables happen to be these list items which have been returned here. Okay, might be a little bit much to get your head around, but just keep plugging away at it and you'll get it. So if we have a look at the questionnaire, I'm more strategic, and we're just going to go through here. Press enter to roll the dice. You have a luck of 7 out of 10. Have a look at this last one here, make sure that works. What is your hero name? And then hero ranged is not happening. So let's have a look and see what I've done wrong. Here. Hero ranged. It's always good to have a little error. Let's try that again. 1, enter the dice. So 3 out of 10 this time for my luck. So here we go, we've got our class attributes all printed out. So because I said I was more strategic, I got 50 attack and 100 defense. Had I done the other way around, it would have gone the other way around. My luck, you can see, was 3. The health was set to 100. Magic 50, name, Lee, and ranged 100. Notice as well it prints it out in alphabetical order. So that is how to create a class, how to properly create a class, how you'd expect to be creating the classes at A level, how to then create objects from that class. So this is how we created an object, and how to pass attributes from a function which we've created here, pass those attributes into a list here, and then use those list items in your object, which are here. Okay, we're going to be using this to actually carry on with the text adventure and other things. So I hope you got a lot out of that today. It just makes it a little bit wider so you can see. Hope you got a lot out of that today, and we'll see you next time.